biological guitars. We studied gay people versus righteous people. Twitter.gov, Elon Musk announced that he's going to be treating the words cis and cisgender as a slur. It was this guy, James Essie, who posted a really stupid tweet. He formally and publicly declares that he rejects the label of cis. I don't believe in gender ideology. I don't self-identify as cis. Using this term makes me feel unsafe and is demonstrative of your hatred towards me. Anyone who uses the term cis, to me, is a bigot. The reason why this is dumb is because cis is just an objective term to refer to a majority group of people. Like, if you think that cis is a slur, that logic would also mean that something like white is a slur, or straight is a slur, or man is a slur, or literally like any other just objective, non-pejorative word to describe something. When we think of what constitutes a slur, there's typically 3 primary criteria which we're talking about. The first is that it refers to an objective group of people, and it is true that cis does refer to an objective group of people who are not trans. Now, the other criteria is where it completely fails. The second criteria is that it's something that is intrinsically and inherently derogatory, often dehumanizing in its nature. This is also the reason why you'll see that overwhelmingly slurs are nouns, like the T-slur, like the N-word. Slurs tend to be nouns because when you use a noun to slur someone, you're saying you are just this thing. Meanwhile, adjectives tend not to be slurs because they just describe a type of person. Like, for example, trans or black would be adjectives to describe a type of person. The slurs that would refer to those groups of people are nouns. The other criteria for a slur is typically that it refers to a marginalized group or a group that is marginalized because of that identity of the category that they belong to. And cisgender people are not marginalized for being cisgender in any way. As far as the point of adjectives that are slurs, sometimes slurs have like adjective versions. Like the R word does have an adjective version. And I think that generally speaking, the adjective version of that word is less dehumanizing than the noun version of that word. I mean, both can absolutely be seen as slurs and dehumanizing, but the adjective version is not seen as so. Although some might say that distinction is not relevant at all and very slight. But yeah, I can't really think of like other adjectives that are typically used as slurs, because that's typically not how they work. But to sum it up, I made this meme for the Twitter, and I think it perfectly sums it up. It's just the scene from SpongeBob where Patrick's like, is mayonnaise an instrument? And horseradish is not an instrument either. If we want to get into this like a little bit further, I mean, people have been going kind of crazy about this. We also had J.K. Rowling making a very similar point. Cis is ideological language, signifying belief in the unfalsifiable concept of gender identity. You have a perfect right to believe in unprovable essences that may or may not match the sex body, but the rest of us have a right to disagree and to refuse to adopt your jargon. So, like, if you don't want to call yourself cis, you don't have to call yourself cis. The whole reason why people coin the term cis, which, by the way, using cis as, like, an adjective, as, like, a root, it exists in plenty other contexts. There's, like, the chemistry adaptation of cis, where we're talking about what side atoms will lie on relatively to each other. So cis as a Latin root means on the same side, while trans as a Latin root means on the opposite side. There's also examples like geography and travel, where there have been phrases like transatlantic trade to refer to trade which occurs across the Atlantic Ocean. Meanwhile, cisatlantic trade or cisatlantic travel would be staying on the same side of the Atlantic Ocean. There's some like early Roman texts of, I think it's Julius Caesar, writing about like, it's like cisalpine, like on the same side of the Alpine mountains. It's a very common term. And the entire point of using the term cisgender was to have a retronym to refer to people who are not trans. So the idea of a retronym is a type of word which refers to an already existing type of thing, so that we have objective language to distinguish it from a either newly created or newly recognized type of thing. Probably the most common example of a retronym would be acoustic guitars. So it used to be the case that all guitars were acoustic guitars, but then with the invention of the electric guitar, it now became useful to distinguish acoustic versus electric guitars. Trying to use something that is subjective, like normal guitars or real guitars or biological guitars just creates confusion. And it's also subject to be falsified, particularly if we're talking about like a medical context or a research context. If you were doing a study on trans people and cis people, and the study was about like normal people and trans people, you could certainly imagine how some people might interpret normal to include trans people, while other people might interpret normal to not include trans people. In a different society where they have more gender expansive views of gender, and most people are somewhere on, say, some kind of like gender expansive scale, maybe in that society being trans or being gender expansive is what's normal. This is why it's important to have objective language. And the other thing that's really funny, it's literally just recycled homophobic discourse. If we go back literally just a couple years, there were multiple instances of people trying to argue that straight was a slur. This one was really funny. This was like a Christian advocacy blog, and they said, straight is offensive to many people who prefer the terms righteous or holy relationships. They were literally like, don't call me straight, call me righteous. Which is just hilarious. Imagine having to write a research paper where you have to say, we studied gay people versus righteous people because the homophobes won. Oh my goodness. It's really crazy. The other thing is that you typically don't see people doing this as like calling lesser known retronyms as slurs. There's lots of other lesser known retronyms that are seeing some wider use. For example, people who are not autistic are allistic. Allistic would be the retronym for people who are not autistic. There's also allosexual for people who are not asexual. Oh, there's a retronym for intersex people that okay, what is it? I need to look it up. Indosex. That's it. Yeah, so like indosex would be somebody who is not intersex. Is it offensive to be recognized as indosex? Is it offensive to be recognized as allistic? No, it's just recognizing a characteristic about yourself. Is it offensive to be recognized as white? I mean, maybe Elon Musk would think so. It's so funny how far he's come from his older stance. Twitter serves as the de facto public town square. Failing to adhere to free speech principles fundamentally undermines democracy. His own logic would say that he just failed and undermined democracy. Free speech absolutist Elon Musk. The other thing that's really funny is that this guy who got the term cis banned from Twitter was really upset that people DM'd him calling him sissy, like with a C, which is pretty funny. I think that if you were to argue that any of these terms are a slur, you might be able to make a case for sissy being a slur. It doesn't refer to like a group of people that are marginalized by that identity. It would be more similar to like the C word for white people. You can't say on Twitch because Twitch is kind of crazy. But I think that sissy's a funny one. Also really funny that Elon says that cis and cisgender are slurs, but not sissy. Like, it's well known that the Twitter algorithm doesn't even treat like the T slur as a slur. Like, you can see just in the replies, like, people openly using the T-slur. There have also been, like, really widespread posts. There was that one, like, conservative woman who was like, I'm pregnant, T-slurs could never do this. Like, it got, like, hundreds of thousands of views and, like, tens of thousands of likes. And so apparently, like, the T-slur is totally fine on Twitter, but cis is not. Elon Musk is going to be on the side of history that says straight is offensive. We prefer righteous or holy relationships. So I'm playing some Jeskai, and it's based off of the new Flame of Anor card from the Lord of the Rings set, which is just absolutely busted if you